In the year 1650, long before motivation books and productivity gurus existed, a young samurai learned a lesson that most people today never discover until their lives are already damaged. His name was Miyamoto Musashi, and before he became a legend, before his name was spoken with fear and respect, he was mocked, underestimated, and openly laughed at. Other warriors saw him as rough, unpolished, and strange. He did not dress like them. He did not follow their rituals for approval. He did not seek praise, rank, or comfort. What they could not see was that Musashi was quietly building something far more dangerous than skill. He was forging a discipline that did not depend on motivation, mood, or emotion. While others trained when they felt inspired, Musashi trained when his body ached, when his mind resisted, when every excuse whispered for him to stop. He understood something that separates the unstoppable from the average: discipline is not an action, it is an identity. Most people wait to feel ready before they act. Musashi acted first and let his feelings struggle behind him. He practiced alone in the cold, striking imaginary opponents until his hands bled, not because it felt good, but because he refused to let comfort decide his future. Every laugh he heard became fuel, every insult became confirmation that he was walking a path few were willing to endure. This is where most people fail, not because they lack potential, but because they cannot survive the phase where progress is invisible and ridicule is loud. Musashi accepted being misunderstood. He accepted being alone. He accepted looking foolish today so he could become unbeatable tomorrow. In a world obsessed with fast results, his discipline was slow, brutal, and silent. He did not announce his goals. He did not explain himself. He let time and results speak. The samurai around him believed discipline meant strict rules and rigid routines. Musashi knew better. His discipline was internal. He trained his mind to obey even when motivation disappeared. He learned to move forward when fear was loud and confidence was absent. This is the discipline that breaks most people, because it offers no immediate reward, no applause, no validation. Only loneliness and repetition. And yet, this is the same discipline that later made Musashi unbeatable in over 60 duels. Long before the victories, before the legend, before the respect, there was this phase, where nothing seemed to work, where effort went unnoticed, where quitting would have felt reasonable. Most people quit here. Musashi did not. He understood that the mind must be trained harder than the body, because the body will follow whatever the mind repeatedly accepts. This first stage of his journey was not about becoming strong. It was about becoming unbreakable. As Musashi continued down his lonely path, he began to understand a truth that separated real warriors from those who only played the role: the greatest enemy was never the opponent in front of him, but the weakness inside his own mind. Every morning he woke with the same resistance most people feel: the urge to stay comfortable, the desire to delay, the voice that says, "Not today." But unlike others, Musashi did not negotiate with that voice. He treated it as an enemy to be defeated daily. This is where his discipline became ruthless. He trained not just when conditions were perfect, but especially when they were not. Rain, exhaustion, hunger, doubt, these were no longer obstacles, they were training tools. Musashi believed that if his mind could remain calm and obedient under discomfort, then no battlefield would ever shake him. While other samurai sharpened their swords, he sharpened his attention. He observed how fear entered the body, how hesitation slowed movement, how pride blinded judgment. Instead of avoiding these states, he walked directly into them. He would intentionally exhaust himself before practice, forcing his body to move when energy was gone, teaching his mind that action was still possible even when strength felt empty. This created a terrifying advantage. In real combat, when others panicked as their breath shortened and muscles burned, Musashi remained clear, because he had already lived in that state thousands of times. He was not training to look impressive. He was training to be reliable under pressure. Most people fail here because they confuse discipline with intensity. They push hard for a short time, burn out, then disappear. Musashi chose consistency over drama. His sessions were not always long, but they were never skipped. He understood that the mind learns obedience through repetition, not through occasional bursts of effort. Each day he showed up, even when progress felt invisible, he was carving a command into his nervous system: I act regardless of how I feel. Over time, this command became automatic. The hesitation that paralyzes most people simply did not arise in him. Another secret of Musashi's discipline was his refusal to cling to ego. If a technique failed, he did not defend it emotionally. He adjusted. If he lost a practice exchange, he studied it without shame. Ego, he believed, was heavier than armor and far more dangerous. It slowed learning and created blind spots. By dropping the need to appear skilled, Musashi accelerated his growth beyond others who were trapped protecting their image. This mindset is unbearable for most people because it demands brutal honesty. You must see your flaws clearly, without excuses, without self-pity. Musashi embraced this discomfort. He believed that clarity, even when painful, was the fastest path to mastery. While others chased recognition, he chased precision. While others sought comfort, he sought truth. Slowly, without anyone noticing, this approach transformed him. His movements became efficient. His reactions became sharp. His presence became unsettling. People could not explain why, but when Musashi entered a space, something shifted. It was not arrogance. It was certainty. Certainty built from thousands of quiet battles against himself, battles most people avoid their entire lives. By the time Musashi's discipline had fully matured, it was no longer something he did, it was something he was. This is the stage most people never reach, because it requires abandoning the illusion that motivation will save you. Musashi understood that motivation is fragile. It rises when conditions are easy and disappears when resistance appears. So he built his life around a different principle: structure over emotion. His days followed a rhythm so deliberate that even his moods had no authority over his actions. Training, reflection, solitude, and observation were non-negotiable. When his mind felt sharp, he trained. When his mind felt dull, he trained. When he doubted himself, he trained. This repetition rewired his identity. He no longer asked, "Do I feel like doing this?" The question itself vanished. Action happened first, feeling followed later. This is the mental shift that separates the unstoppable from the talented. Talent waits for the right moment. Discipline creates it. Musashi also mastered the art of learning faster by narrowing his focus. While others scattered their energy across many techniques, many styles, many opinions, he went deep. He believed one principle understood completely was worth more than 100 half-learned ideas. When he practiced a single strike, he did not repeat it mindlessly. He explored every variable: distance, timing, angle, breath, intention. He studied how the strike changed when he was calm versus when he was angry, when he was tired versus when he was fresh. Through this, he learned something profound: skill is not mechanical, it is psychological. The mind directs the body, and a confused mind produces sloppy movement. By refining his inner state, his external performance sharpened automatically. This is why Musashi could adapt so quickly in real combat. He was not memorizing techniques, he was mastering principles. And principles transfer across situations. This is also why he could learn any new skill faster than others. Once you understand how attention, repetition, and feedback work, the subject almost doesn't matter. Swordsmanship, strategy, art, philosophy, all obey the same laws of mastery. Musashi applied these laws relentlessly. He sought feedback not from praise, but from reality. If something worked, he kept it. If it failed, he discarded it immediately. No attachment. No excuses. Reality was his teacher, and it was brutally honest. Another key aspect of his discipline was solitude. Musashi deliberately spent long periods alone, not because he hated people, but because he understood how easily the mind becomes contaminated by noise. Opinions, trends, social comparison, these weaken inner clarity. In solitude, he could hear his own thoughts clearly. He could observe his fears without distraction, examine his desires without judgment, and correct his thinking without interference. Most people avoid solitude because it forces them to face themselves. Musashi used it as a forge. Alone, his weaknesses surfaced. Alone, he confronted them. This gave him an inner stability that could not be shaken by crowds, critics, or chaos. When he eventually faced opponents, they were not just fighting a man with a sword. They were fighting a mind that had already been tested in silence, pressure, and self-confrontation. That is why Musashi often appeared calm to the point of being cold. His emotions were not suppressed, they were trained. He felt fear, but it did not control his actions. He felt anger, but it did not cloud his judgment. He felt pride, but he did not serve it. This emotional discipline made him unpredictable and terrifying. While others reacted, he responded. While others rushed, he waited. While others panicked, he saw clearly. And in that clarity, victory was often decided before the first strike was even made. As Musashi's mastery deepened, his discipline evolved beyond physical combat and entered the realm of strategy and perception. He began to see that winning was not about overpowering an opponent, but about controlling the conditions in which the fight took place. Most warriors focused only on technique, the swing of the sword, the speed of the strike, the strength of the body. Musashi focused on timing, distance, rhythm, and most importantly, the opponent's mind. He studied how fear revealed itself in posture, how arrogance created openings, how impatience rushed people into mistakes. This level of awareness required a discipline far more demanding than muscle training. It required complete presence. Musashi trained himself to stay fully aware of the moment, not lost in thoughts of victory or defeat. He knew that the mind that wanders is the mind that loses. In duels, this gave him a frightening advantage. While others fixated on his blade, he observed their breathing, their stance, the subtle shifts in weight that betrayed intention. He could feel when an attack was coming before it was launched, not through prediction, but through sensitivity. This awareness was not mystical, it was trained through endless observation and restraint. Musashi often spoke of the void, a mental state where action arises without conscious effort. This state cannot be forced. It emerges only when discipline has stripped away excess thinking. Most people sabotage themselves by overthinking. Musashi disciplined himself to trust what he had trained. Once the moment arrived, analysis stopped. The body acted freely. This is why his movements appeared effortless and sudden, as if the decision had already been made before the opponent moved. Another misunderstood aspect of Musashi's discipline was his relationship with fear. He did not seek to eliminate it. He studied it. Fear, he believed, sharpened perception when properly understood. Instead of resisting fear, he allowed it to exist while refusing to obey it. This distinction is critical. Resistance amplifies fear, observation weakens it. By watching fear rise and fall without reacting, Musashi gained control over it. On the battlefield, this meant his heart could race while his hands remained steady. His mind stayed clear even when death was close. Most people collapse under fear because they identify with it. Musashi treated fear as information, not identity. This allowed him to act decisively when others froze. His discipline also extended to preparation. He believed the battle was decided long before swords crossed. Sleep, nutrition, posture, breath, all were treated as part of training. Nothing was random. Nothing was neglected. While others relied on confidence, Musashi relied on readiness. Confidence can vanish in an instant. Readiness remains. He also rejected rigid tradition when it limited effectiveness. This made him controversial. Many accused him of disrespecting the old ways. Musashi did not care. His loyalty was to truth, not to approval. If a method worked, he used it. If it failed, He abandoned it, regardless of who endorsed it. This intellectual independence was another pillar of his discipline. It prevented stagnation and allowed constant evolution. Over time, this approach made Musashi seem unconventional, even dangerous. He fought with two swords when others used one. He arrived late to duels to disrupt expectations. He chose terrain deliberately. None of this was accidental. It was strategy rooted in psychological dominance. His opponents often lost before the fight began, unsettled by his unpredictability and calm. This is what happens when discipline reaches its highest form. It no longer looks like effort. It looks like inevitability. Musashi was not rushing to win. He was patiently allowing reality to unfold in his favor, because he had already prepared for every variable he could control. And that preparation was the result of a lifetime of choosing discipline over comfort, clarity over ego, and awareness over impulse. As Musashi's reputation grew, so did the misunderstanding around him. From the outside, people saw victories and assumed natural genius. They believed he was simply born different, gifted in a way ordinary men were not. This illusion is comforting, because it excuses mediocrity. Musashi rejected it completely. He knew that what separated him from others was not talent, but his relationship with suffering. Where most people avoided discomfort, he treated it as instruction. Every hardship was a lesson if approached correctly. Hunger taught focus. Fatigue taught efficiency. Failure taught precision. This mindset transformed obstacles into tools. Instead of asking, "How do I avoid this?" Musashi asked, "What is this teaching me?" That single shift allowed him to progress at a speed that seemed unnatural to observers. He also understood that discipline without direction becomes cruelty toward oneself. Many warriors trained brutally but mindlessly, accumulating damage rather than mastery. Musashi trained intelligently. He paid close attention to recovery, reflection, and correction. After each encounter, whether real or imagined, he reviewed his decisions in detail. Not emotionally, but analytically. Where did his attention drift? Where did he hesitate? Where did ego interfere? This constant self-audit prevented stagnation. While others repeated the same mistakes for years, Musashi corrected his within days. Another crucial element of his discipline was detachment from outcome. He did not obsess over winning or losing. Obsession creates tension, and tension clouds judgment. Musashi focused entirely on execution. If his execution was correct, the outcome would take care of itself. This freed him from pressure and allowed him to remain flexible in combat. When plans failed, he adapted instantly instead of panicking. This adaptability made him nearly impossible to trap. His opponents often committed fully to a strategy, emotionally invested in its success. When Musashi disrupted it, their minds collapsed before their bodies did. Discipline also shaped his ethics. Musashi believed that true strength required restraint. He did not seek unnecessary violence or dominance. He fought when required, not to prove himself, but to resolve conflict. This restraint made his actions precise rather than reckless. Many strong men destroy themselves by needing to display power. Musashi had nothing to prove. His discipline had already settled that question internally. This internal resolution created an unshakable calm that others misread as arrogance. In reality, it was certainty. He knew his limits because he had tested them honestly. He knew it was about alignment, aligning mind, body, and environment into a single action. When alignment was achieved, effort decreased and effectiveness increased. This is the paradox most people miss. They believe discipline makes life rigid and heavy. Musashi discovered the opposite. True discipline removes friction. It simplifies choices. It eliminates wasted energy. It creates freedom through structure. By mastering himself, Musashi gained the ability to move fluidly through unpredictable situations. Nothing caught him completely off guard, because he was always present. This presence was his greatest weapon. Not the sword, not strength, not speed, but clarity under pressure. And that clarity was earned through years of silent, disciplined commitment to improvement, long before anyone was watching or applauding. In the later years of his life, Musashi began to articulate the principles that had guided him, not as rigid rules, but as observations carved from experience. He understood that discipline, when misunderstood, becomes obsession, and obsession blinds. True discipline, he believed, creates awareness rather than narrowing it. This is why his thinking matured beyond technique into philosophy. He wrote not to impress, but to preserve clarity for those willing to look past surface-level advice. One of his core insights was that attachment is the root of hesitation. Attachment to reputation, attachment to comfort, attachment to outcome, all create fear of loss. Fear slows action. To move freely, one must accept loss in advance. Musashi trained himself to let go of everything that could be taken from him. This did not make him careless, it made him decisive. When nothing is being protected, action becomes clean and direct. Another principle he emphasized was rhythm. Everything, he observed, moves in patterns: people, conversations, conflict, even life itself. Most people are unaware of rhythm, reacting late or too early. Through discipline, Musashi learned to feel rhythm instinctively. In combat, this allowed him to disrupt opponents by breaking their timing. In life, it allowed him to act when conditions were ripe and wait when they were not. This sensitivity cannot be taught through instruction alone. It emerges only through sustained attention and patience. Musashi also warned against specialization without understanding. Many warriors mastered a narrow style and became trapped inside it. Musashi studied broadly, not to collect knowledge, but to see underlying connections. He believed that once you understand the root, branches become irrelevant. This is why he could adapt across weapons, environments, and opponents. His discipline was flexible, not brittle. Flexibility, he believed, was the true sign of strength. Rigidity breaks under pressure. Flexibility absorbs and redirects. This philosophy extended to his view of victory. Winning, in Musashi's eyes, was not about domination but about resolution. A true victory restored balance rather than creating new conflict. This perspective kept his ego in check and prevented reckless escalation. He saw clearly that many defeats in life are self-inflicted through pride and impatience. Discipline was his antidote to these traps. By slowing down internally, he moved faster externally. By accepting uncertainty, he reduced anxiety. By releasing the need to be right, he increased effectiveness. In his final reflections, Musashi emphasized that the path never ends. Mastery is not a destination but a continual refinement of perception. Complacency is the enemy of growth. Even in old age, he remained a student, observing, adjusting, and simplifying. He encouraged others not to copy his actions, but to adopt his attitude: honesty with oneself, commitment to practice, and respect for reality. This attitude, he believed, was transferable to any pursuit. Whether one wielded a sword, a brush, or a tool, the same laws applied. Attention creates accuracy. Repetition creates reliability. Detachment creates freedom. Musashi's life stands as proof that discipline is not about harshness or deprivation. It is about alignment with what is real. When a person stops fighting reality and starts working with it, effort decreases and power increases. This is the quiet strength that made Musashi unstoppable, not because he dominated others, but because he mastered the only opponent that truly mattered: himself. As Musashi's understanding deepened, he came to recognize that the greatest enemy of discipline was not weakness, but unconsciousness. Most people, he observed, do not choose their actions, they simply repeat patterns formed by habit, fear, and social conditioning. They believe they are deciding, yet they are only reacting. This illusion of choice keeps them trapped. Musashi believed that awareness was the first true act of strength. Without awareness, effort is wasted, no matter how intense it appears. A man can train endlessly, work tirelessly, and still remain ineffective if he does not see himself clearly. This is why Musashi placed such importance on self-observation. He watched his thoughts the same way he watched an opponent's stance, not with judgment, but with precision. When anger arose, he did not suppress it, nor did he indulge it. He studied it. Where did it come from? What expectation had been violated? What fear had been touched? Through this process, emotions lost their power to hijack him. They became information rather than commands. Another realization followed naturally: most conflict escalates not because of necessity, but because of identity. People defend an image of themselves rather than the truth of the moment. An insult feels dangerous only when the ego believes it must be protected. Musashi trained himself to loosen his attachment to identity. He was not attached to being seen as invincible, honorable, or superior. He focused instead on being accurate. Accuracy required humility. When the ego relaxes, perception sharpens. This allowed Musashi to respond appropriately rather than emotionally. In daily life, this meant fewer unnecessary battles. In combat, it meant conserving energy and waiting for decisive moments. He also understood that discipline must be internal before it can be external. Many men attempt to control their environment before they can control their impulses. They seek authority, structure, and power, hoping these will create order inside them. Musashi reversed this. He cultivated inner order first. From that still center, external order followed naturally. His calm unsettled opponents more than aggression ever could. People expected force and encountered silence. That silence created hesitation, and hesitation created openings. Musashi did not rush to fill space with action. He allowed space to work for him. This principle applied beyond combat. In conversation, silence revealed more than speech. In decision-making, patience exposed hidden variables. He learned that clarity emerges when one stops forcing outcomes. Discipline, therefore, was not about tightening control, but about removing interference. Over time, Musashi's life simplified. He needed fewer possessions, fewer explanations, fewer validations. This simplicity was not withdrawal from life, but engagement without excess. When distractions fell away, intention became clean. Every movement had purpose. Every word carried weight. He warned that without this simplicity, discipline decays into performance, something done to appear strong rather than to become effective. True discipline, he insisted, is quiet. It does not announce itself. It is visible only in results. By the time Musashi reached the later stages of his journey, he no longer thought in terms of winning or losing. He thought in terms of alignment. Was his action aligned with reality? Was his response appropriate to the moment? If the answer was yes, the outcome mattered less. This orientation freed him from anxiety and regret. He acted fully, then released the result. In this way, Musashi embodied the deepest lesson of self-control: when awareness leads and ego follows, life becomes both simpler and more powerful. Over time, Musashi came to understand that the true measure of self-control was not how calm one could remain in isolation, but how steady one could stay when life applied pressure. Solitude could refine awareness, but interaction revealed mastery. It was easy to feel disciplined alone in a quiet room. It was far harder to maintain clarity when insulted, challenged, or provoked. For this reason, Musashi did not separate inner practice from daily life. Every encounter became training. Every irritation was an opportunity to observe the mind in motion. When someone spoke harshly, he noticed the immediate tightening in the body. When plans failed, he observed the impulse to resist reality. Instead of reacting, he paused just long enough to see the impulse clearly. That pause changed everything. In that space, choice existed. Musashi believed that most people live without ever touching this pause. They move from feeling to action so quickly that life feels uncontrollable. By practicing awareness in ordinary moments, he lengthened the gap between impulse and response. This gap was not hesitation born of fear, but stillness born of understanding. From it, action became precise rather than impulsive. Another insight followed: energy is limited, and emotional reactions wasted. Anger, resentment, and pride consume strength without producing results. Musashi treated energy as a warrior treats supplies. Nothing could be squandered. When emotions surged, he did not fight them, because fighting also consumed energy. Instead, he allowed them to pass through awareness like weather through the sky. The emotion ran its course, but his clarity remained intact. This conservation of energy gave him endurance others lacked. While others burned themselves out in constant reaction, Musashi remained steady. He understood that self-control was not about denying feeling, but about not leaking power through unconscious expression. He also recognized that people often cling to suffering because it reinforces identity. Complaining, blaming, and reliving past injuries make a person feel justified, but they also keep him trapped. Musashi chose responsibility instead. Responsibility did not mean self-condemnation, it meant acknowledging that his responses were always his own. Even when wronged, he focused on what he could govern: his perception, his action, his attitude. This mindset restored agency. Where others felt victimized, he felt capable. Where others waited for fairness, he adapted. Adaptability became one of his greatest strengths. He compared rigidity to dry wood that snaps under pressure, while flexibility was like bamboo that bends and survives. This flexibility extended to his understanding of failure. Failure, to Musashi, was not a verdict but feedback. If an approach failed, it simply revealed what did not work. Emotional attachment to being right blinded many warriors. Musashi detached from being right and attached himself to learning. This allowed constant improvement. Each mistake sharpened him rather than discouraged him. Over time, this approach reshaped his character. He became less reactive, less defensive, and more observant. His presence grew heavier, not through intimidation, but through depth. People sensed that he was not easily shaken, not because he suppressed emotion, but because he was no longer owned by it. This was the quiet authority of true self-control, a mind that could meet chaos without becoming chaotic, and pressure without collapsing inward. As Musashi's understanding matured, he realized that the deepest form of self-control was inseparable from humility. Pride, he saw, was the hidden trigger behind most loss of control. When pride was threatened, anger rushed in to defend a fragile image. When expectations were not met, frustration erupted because the ego demanded the world behave a certain way. Musashi trained himself to loosen this grip on identity. He stopped asking how events reflected on him and started asking what each moment required. This shift changed how he moved through the world. Insults lost their sharpness because they no longer attacked a rigid self-image. Praise also lost its intoxicating power, because it no longer inflated his sense of worth. He became less reactive precisely because he became less self-centered. His attention turned outward, toward reality as it was, not as he wanted it to be. In this state, discipline felt natural rather than forced. He was not constantly correcting himself, because there was less inner resistance to begin with. Musashi also understood that many people confuse self-control with emotional coldness. He rejected this completely. A controlled mind, in his view, was capable of feeling deeply without being overwhelmed. Sadness could be felt without collapsing into despair. Anger could be felt without turning into violence. Fear could be felt without paralysis. Emotions were signals, not commands. By listening without obeying, he extracted their information while preserving freedom of action. This approach required courage, because it meant facing discomfort directly instead of escaping it through reaction. Over time, this courage built trust in himself. He no longer feared his own emotions, because he knew they would not hijack him. This inner trust produced calm even in uncertainty. Musashi also emphasized simplicity as a foundation for control. A cluttered life produces a cluttered mind. Excess desires multiply frustrations, and each frustration becomes a potential trigger. By reducing unnecessary wants, he reduced unnecessary conflict. He ate simply, lived simply, and focused on essentials. This was not asceticism for its own sake, but strategic clarity. When fewer things mattered, fewer things could disturb his balance. He extended this simplicity to thought itself. Instead of replaying scenarios endlessly, he returned attention to the present task. What is happening now? What action is needed now? This question anchored him. It prevented spirals of regret about the past and anxiety about the future. In moments of confrontation, this clarity made his responses appear effortless. Others mistook it for fearlessness or aggression, but it was neither. It was presence. Presence allowed him to see openings others missed, both in combat and in life. He could act at the exact right moment because he was not lost in mental noise. Through this, Musashi demonstrated that self-control is not restraint layered on top of chaos, but order cultivated at the source. When the mind is clear, control is no longer a struggle, it becomes a natural expression of understanding. As Musashi reached the later stages of his life, his understanding of self-control transformed into something even quieter and more profound. He no longer thought in terms of controlling himself at all. Control implied force, and force implied inner conflict. Instead, he lived in alignment. His actions flowed from awareness rather than willpower. Where most people exhausted themselves by constantly resisting impulses, Musashi experienced stability because there was little resistance inside him. Desires still appeared, emotions still rose and fell, but they passed through him like weather across an open field. Nothing stayed long enough to dominate. This was the state he described as being unmoved while fully alive. From the outside, it looked like discipline beyond human reach. From the inside, it felt like ease. He understood that true mastery was not about domination, but about harmony between mind, body, and circumstance. When these were aligned, the question of giving up never arose, because there was nothing to fight against. He also came to see that most people fail not because they lack strength, but because they waste it. Energy leaks through constant reaction, comparison, and self-judgment. Musashi conserved his energy by refusing to argue with reality. When something happened, he accepted that it had happened before deciding what to do next. This single habit preserved immense mental power. Instead of burning energy on resentment or blame, he invested it in deliberate action. Over years, this compounded into extraordinary effectiveness. He could train longer, focus deeper, and endure hardship better than others, not because he was tougher, but because he was less divided internally. His mind was not fighting itself. This unity became his greatest weapon, far sharper than any blade. Musashi understood that this way of living could not be transmitted through words alone. It had to be practiced daily in small, ordinary moments. How you respond when corrected. How you behave when tired. How you speak when frustrated. These moments were the real battlefield. Victory there mattered more than victory in any duel. He taught that if you could master yourself in the mundane, you would be unshakable in the extreme. This is why he warned against waiting for perfect conditions to change. Discipline was not built in moments of inspiration, but in repeated conscious choices when nothing dramatic was happening. Each small choice strengthened the space between impulse and action. In the end, Musashi's message was simple, though not easy. You are not your emotions. You are the awareness that experiences them. When you learn to stand in that awareness, life stops throwing you around. Failure becomes instruction. Criticism becomes information. Pain becomes a teacher instead of an enemy. This does not make life gentle, but it makes it meaningful. The samurai's secret was never about fighting harder or pushing longer. It was about seeing clearly, choosing deliberately, and moving forward without being dragged by inner chaos. Those who learn this late often wish they had learned it earlier, not because life would have been painless, but because it would have been lived with far more intention, dignity, and inner freedom.